All right, I want to walk you through a couple of my books. These have been called a number of things. When I first heard and was introduced to them, we called them deconstruction books. Since then, they're most commonly known as altered books. I just want to walk you through a few of mine. This is one of the first ones I did. It's actually number 2, as you can see from this little card I created here, and I've decided to put these in all of my books. The first one is packed away, and it is probably 20 something years old. I don't think I even finished the entire thing because it was a project for school. But we're going to walk you through. So this is a book. This happens to be called New York at War, and I found this book at a antique shop or thrift shop or something. And all I did on the outside was I just drew this hexagonal pattern, colored some in with Sharpie, some in with Prismacolor. I did that on the front and the back. You can see where it got water damage at one point because of various things. This one's been moved a couple times. But I did spray it with like an acrylic sealer, so that's where you get that kind of shine, right? Let's just walk through these. That is my tag. I added some sparkle, some glitter. I did weave several of the pages that I had torn out and then glued it to a card on the back and then glued that right on into the spine. I really prefer to think of these pages as just a chance to play, explore, and that's why I'm teaching a workshop. I'm actually ending up teaching 3 workshops about this, which is called the portable playground. That's how I approached it with my students, but you're allowed to do whatever you want. And if you just want to grab a book and get going, then do that too. In here, you'll just see lots of different things. Okay, that was a failed attempt at, I believe it was crayon and India ink resist. Did not turn out the way I wanted. It's still really cool, so it goes in the book. I like to call this the portable playground so that it has all the different things that I've tried. Whether they were successes or failures, I still like to put them in there because then I can go back and say, hey, I'm pretty sure I did that at one point. Let's see how it turned out. Here are 2 different flower pages out of a magazine that I just wove together. This is just wax paper because, as you can see, this stuck together at one point. This is collage of tissue paper, and then I believe I just Mod Podged the flower on top. It is very shiny. I did spray a sealer on it. It is still incredibly sticky, so that's why I've got that wax paper. Whatever tickles your fancy, whatever makes you happy, whatever sparks your interest. This is actually a project my students are going to be starting this week, so how apropos that it's in the book. I also included little notes from my students and some little scrap of paper hearts I created. Any little doodles. I actually cut these pages very carefully with an X-Acto knife and wove the construction paper in there. You could do blackout poetry, whatever you like. These are just squares of construction paper that I glued in to make kind of scales or almost like roof tiles. We got some blackout poetry here. This is a piece that I did when I first started working at the high school where I taught in the Houston area. My little R fell off. Okay, but again, it doesn't have to be anything specific. It doesn't have to be anything perfect. This is a playground. This is a repository for ideas and experiments. It is not where your best work resides. It is a place for you to try out things. It's a place for you to give space to experiments. Whether they succeed or fail, then you have a record of them. This is one continuous line on this page. Okay, we got some gesso going on. This was one of my students' attempts at some watercolor, and they gave it to me, but they said they wanted me to turn it into something, so I did. Added some little jewels. Anything and everything is fair game in this book. This is chipboard that I colored with some chalk pastels. I drew out and poked the holes and then embroidered all of this and then did a really cool little dream catcher. This one's one of my favorite pieces because it looks just like a piece of black paper with some colors in it. I cut out these squares because I wanted the colors to show through, but there's also a message inside. So, like I said, anything and everything is fair game in here. We've got some washi tape. This was kind of a take on a collagraph. It is multi-layered, it is cardboard, it is paper, it is sandpaper, there's paint, there's all kinds of things. It's an experiment, and it makes a really cool, almost 3D piece that can go in your book. One thing about this is if you look right here, there's a bunch of pages that have been torn out. There's probably close to 30 pages that were ripped out so that this piece would fit. Don't feel bad about altering your book so your things can actually work. Okay, some Zentangle, and then this was some gesso with, I believe I used gelatos. And then there's the quote that is done in, I believe, Prismacolor. This piece is pretty old. Again, just more playing around. These are tiny little puzzle pieces, washi tape. This was just a coloring sheet I had printed out for one of my students, and we just spent some time coloring. Coloring is very therapeutic, it's very beneficial. The only way you get better at certain things is by practicing those things, and you have to practice with the intention of getting better, otherwise you just are not going to get better, right? 30 things that I love about myself. I think that might have changed over time. And then I actually created an envelope and I did Brusho crystal colors, watercolor crystals on here, and then I did my initials. And then at the end of every book, I try to create some kind of index or table of contents, just kind of going over what all's in the book. And I try to make each one a little bit different. So if you'll see, there's number 1 over here. Number 2 is actually written upside down. Okay, 3, 4, back and forth. It just keeps it interesting. And actually in this one, I have a little pocket hidden back here with something that I wanted to put in this book, but it just didn't end up making it. Okay, so that is the first book. Let's take a look at this book. This is about Ingrid Bergman. Again, found it, I believe, in an antique store, thrift store. I kind of wanted to read it, but it never got that far. This right here on top, this texture that you see if we can get a close up on that. Yeah, that is really just like Easter grass that I straightened out and glued on. I didn't straighten it out completely because that's kind of boring, but it does give an interesting look, an interesting texture. So this is technically book 3, and I went ahead and did the end pages on this as well. This is a cutoff from a picture that I included, but this is book 3, and that has one of my tea labels that has a cute little quote. The difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment. And you can see this is somebody's book beforehand, and I don't really ignore that, but I also don't play it up. This book, I did a lot of things directly on the page. Okay, this is an attempt at printmaking, which actually looks pretty cool. Some weaving, and this is just an extra page I glued in, and again, you can see I've got my name in there. Just some line art, some simple line art. We've got some drawings directly on the page. We've got kind of an op art. Anything goes in here. Do not let somebody tell you that you can or can't do a certain thing in your book. It is your book. You get to decide what you want to include. I really prefer that anyone who does this, specifically when I'm talking about my students, that they get to make up their mind. They get to decide what goes in here. There's a few rules. When I was doing this before, they had to have a certain number of pages per grading cycle, and they could do anything they wanted as long as it was appropriate for school. And in the high school level, And since then, we have had the discussion that it cannot be in the act of a crime. It can be just before, it can be just after. In here we've got little envelopes, and each and every one has a little "Dear Me, Love Me" card. Sometimes you just need to make some little reminders about how awesome you are. This was my attempt at a self-portrait, although right here my mom always says that it looks like I have a beard, but it's shading, and if you actually look at it you can see that it's shading. Some Google stickers. Anything goes in here. These are all single lines. Each little paragraph was a different line design. We got some tissue paper collage, a coloring sheet, and again, if you notice, going back here, there's been several pages that have been taken out. Sometimes you need, and it depends on whether you want to or you need to, remove pages. If you don't want to, if you're happy with your book being really fat at the end, then go for it. If you're not wanting that, if you want it to close relatively nicely, then that's fine too. These are just papers that I folded up the corners and then glued in like tiles, some drawing, I'm playing with some jelly roll pens. Here is one. This is a pretty long piece of paper, and at the time this is one of my favorite songs and one of my favorite lyrics. You have the option to do whatever you want in this book. Give yourself permission to play. Give yourself permission to experiment. You can even do fold out pages. Okay, here's an example of a Zentangle design. Okay, you can cut things in your book to make kind of like a flip book or secret pockets. If you do something and you don't like the rest of it, cover it up, paint it something. This one is always pretty cool and catches people off guard. It looks like glass. It's actually not. This is a cut up CD, but it looks like broken glass and gives a really cool effect. If you have the opportunity to ask people for supplies on like Facebook Marketplace or wherever you are able to get things, or if you just have old CDs laying around that you don't want or need anymore, then there's lots of things that you can do with those. Stick them in the microwave, make them get all crackly. That's pretty cool. Just be careful, don't burn your house down. And then here we go, I've got my index. This one is also a little bit different. Here we go with another book. This one, I don't even remember the name of it. I painted over it and all the pages inside have basically been covered up. But this book, this was actually just a piece of newsprint. It is hard to see with all of the light reflecting off of it, but it's very cool texture. Newsprint that I balled up and then kind of straightened out, taped down, and then I scrubbed paint in everywhere. And you can see where I've taped it here, and I painted the inside as well. The back cover, all I did was paint it inside and out. And I added new end pages just because why not? So let's take a little walk through this one. We've got this bright blue end page. All right, book's called Pivot Point. You can use the book title and content as a kind of starting point for your project, or you can just ignore it and pretend like it's not there. Somebody gave me a sticker, so I had to put that in here. I believe this was part of a coloring sheet, but again, anything goes in here. Okay, playing with some jelly roll pens. This was some brush show watercolor that I made kind of a topographical map, and then I called this the Isle of Abundance, and this is kind of explaining it. This is simple. It is some shapes traced, and then it is markers and water to get kind of that bleeding effect. This works a lot better on something like watercolor paper or a mixed media paper that's kind of made for that. So this is not exactly the effect I was going for, but it is still pretty cool. There's a lot of options. Lots of things that you can do as long as you give yourself permission. This is collaged book pages on top of a piece of chipboard that I then drew and glued seed beads onto, and then hardcore glued everything down after that because I didn't want any of those coming off. This is something really cool I learned how to do at conference that I'm actually teaching. These are transparent magazine collage pages. So if you look really carefully at this, you'll see all the greenery, and the greeneries do not match up. There's different shapes of the greenery, there's different colors of the greenery, and then you have the picture of the bird, and that bird is very, very colorful. The lighter your colors are, like this white, the less will actually transfer. So there's more to see through. Just a fun little collage here with some different rectangle shapes. This book is not finished. There's several pages still here to be filled in, but this book was started probably 8-9 years ago. Just one way that you can do this project. This is another book. This one is finished, so it already has the number, and if you can see, I designated. So this is chipboard glued onto the top. I painted over the spine because I don't care about the title of the book. And then I just had some fun little rhinestone trim that I added. The back is also the same chipboard design. I wanted it to look like a footpath through a garden. And this one is sunflowers only. This one was started many years ago, but it's only recently been finished. I really poured into this over the past few years because it had significant meaning for me. Again, this was the Bone Museum. This book is just filled with sunflower images. This book is filled with just sunflower images. There is a picture that's going here. It is a chalk pastel that needs to be fixed so it doesn't rub off over here. We've got water-soluble graphite, we've got alcohol markers, we've got just some simple fine line marker drawing. Got mosaic. This is another marker, fine line marker or fine line pen drawing with intentional blank space. I actually taped this off so that I could not cross over that line. And here's kind of a negative version. It's just black paper with white jelly roll pen, the Moonlight jelly roll pens. Here's a collage, magazine pages. Anything goes in these books. These are the flower petals, and yes, there's writing under here. This one was made at a particularly difficult time in life, so it has personal significance. Do other people necessarily see or understand that? No, but this is not about them. In this book, you'll notice that every page that has something on it, there's several pages that have been removed. I prefer to have my pages so that my books close relatively equal to what they were before. So I take about 3 pages and I glue them together to make it a little bit more sturdy, and then I will take the next 6 pages out. In some cases, I might take more pages. This happens to be instant coffee that I painted. One thing I personally need to do is work on being a little looser in my art. I tend to be very exacting and rigid, and one thing that this book helped me do is kind of experiment and let go a little bit. If you don't know, this looks like the black glue. What I did was I drew with a water-soluble marker, like a Crayola washable marker, and then I put Elmer's glue right on top of it. The glue will soak up that ink, that black, and then I went ahead and did the chalk pastel. So instead of having to make black glue, just put the marker down and let the glue soak up the ink. Prismacolor, this was actually melted crayon. Unfortunately, the crayon, most of the crayon part has popped off, but it was still a really cool idea. This is one that my students really have enjoyed. They think it's really cool. And quite frankly, it is pretty cool. This is just yellow tissue paper glued directly on the page and then marker lines. But this, the middle part, and it's so funny that can I touch it? This is tea leaves. And I put down glue and then I sprinkled the tea leaves on, and then I put down more glue and I sprinkled more tea leaves on, and then I did a wash of glue and water, kind of like a Mod Podge mix over the top of it to hold it in place. Are some of them going to come off? Yes, they are. Is it still really cool? Yes, it is. More water-soluble graphite and marker images. This is gouache on top of coffee, I believe. And then I still need to do my index page here. This is yet to be done. And then here is that front page that needs to be sprayed with Fix. And then I need to trim it down so it can actually fit in the book. But this is Sharpie acrylic markers and chalk pastel. Let's take a minute and discuss how you can do the covers of your books. I have several I'm going to show you. We've already talked about this one. This was newsprint that was crumbled over, and then I did take a brush and hit the highlights just to make them stand out. This is perhaps one of the coolest looking ones I have done. But again, I try to do something new with every book. So that's one option. We've already talked about this one as well. This is that Easter grass that was just stretched out and glued to cover it. Again, very cool. It gives a texture. That's always cool. Here's the first one we talked about, where I just traced the hexagon stencil over and over again till kind of like a honeycomb, and then I colored in some of them. One of the things that you could do is color in all of them. You could do some kind of pattern, but it's entirely up to you. It's your book. You get to decide how you want to decorate or alter it. And then we've got this one that is the chipboard that was cut into 1/2 by 1/2 and 1/2 by 1 inch squares and glued down to look like a footpath in a garden. I have a couple more for you. Some of these are books that have been started as far as the covers and the actual altering of it. This happens to be a thesaurus in dictionary form. Is that what we're using it for? Absolutely not. Here is the front of it, where I just tore up pieces of some of the book pages I had ripped out, and then I just collaged those on top. This book has been fully prepared. I have chopped out pages, I have glued pages. This one is ready to just be filled up. And if you look at it right now, you can see that it is currently sitting at smaller than what it should be when it's closed. That gives me some room. I can always go in and take some of these pages out if I decide to add something really thick to it. That's entirely up to you. It's your prerogative, your project. Here we have another one. This happened to be a file folder that I used to cover, like we used to cover our old textbooks. And then I was given by my family this cute little minion washi tape, and I created a minion out of some construction paper and then just collaged that right on top of the book and covered the entire thing. Again, if you're careful sometimes, or if you're not careful, sometimes Mod Podge can leave kind of a sticky feeling to it. So just be aware you might need to hit it with a fix when you're done. Here's another one. I believe this is like the encyclopedia of winemaking, of wine. There we go. This one, all I did was cover it in duct tape. This one is particularly frustrating for me because it's a very well-bound book. It is stitched in, but the pages do not want to tear out cleanly. So that may be something that you end up dealing with, and if it is, that's fine. You can always find ways around it. So what I have been doing is just going in and gluing pages together, and I will go in and very carefully cut them out later. It's entirely up to you. Alright, so this book is just about ready to be used, and all I did was cover it with some different types of duct tape. And I don't remember, I think I got this duct tape at Dollar Tree years ago, or it could have been something that was on sale at like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, but that's it. The creepy thing about this is these eyeballs, when exposed to light, they glow in the dark. That always catches people off guard. So the good news is, if the power goes out, you can find your book because all these little eyeballs are going to be staring at you. Let's talk about another book that I have here. This one is in the stages of being ready. Now, this is an old textbook, okay? And the reason I know that, boom, right there. Property of the state of Texas, oopsies. And this goes back to the 80s or something. Would you like that? Dick Van Dyke. This was his book. Anyway, this is a book that has been well used, well loved. It was actually well created. I believe this has been like nailed in. I don't know much about bookmaking. But the thing with this book is I am hesitant to start tearing pages out of this book. This may be a book that when it's done, it's one of those like super fat books from all the stuff that's in here. Now I have, and I'm going to leave the cover the way it is, Bill Martin Jr. If you're a teacher or you have little kids, you know Bill Martin Jr. Anyway, the whole point is here that I have started gluing pages together. There's some really amazing artwork in here. If you were to tear out pages, you could keep the images for collaging mixed media projects. But I have glued, every 3 pages have been glued together. So if I decide later that I want to go back and I want to very carefully run a blade down and cut out pages, I just would cut out 2 sets of 3. That would give me more room. This book is really cool. It is amazing. This is not what textbooks look like when I was there. It has pages like this one where it's just a picture for storytelling. So the students would look at the book and they would have to come up with a story for this picture. But then there's also pages like this, and some of the pages that were in here about this were explaining like where these people live and what they see other people doing and all kinds of stuff. See, just like this. Anyway, it is very cool. It is in the process of being glued together. I've got a little bit more, well, a little bit less than halfway to go. But this is a very fun little book. You can see that some students just really didn't like it. But that takes me to options for your covers. This is entirely up to you. If you want to stab this book, stab the book. If you want to burn the edges, if you want to carve into it, if you want to cut, whatever you want to do with these books is totally up to you. I have a couple more that I'm going to show you and other uses for these books, so stay tuned.